the case may be. This is Rob Spear, back from a hiatus to Florida over the winter, which turned out to be one of the mildest winters yet. I mean, I haven't done a show in so long. There's just been accelerating the pace of the implementation of the new Nouvelle TSA agents are becoming more prolific and more aggressive in the airports, and now they're entering stadia or stadiums for big football games and baseball games. There's talk of them coming into the malls to check on people, and you people sitting there, if you happen to see this, changing the channel, that's how most people find my show, and you see this, you know, try not to let it just go in one ear and out the other. You're living in the United States of America with a K more and more, and I don't know what people are thinking now. You know, it's not going to pass you by. It's not going to like magically exclude you. I mean, you can see it everywhere you go. You know, show 3 forms of ID just to cash a check at the bank where you've been going for the last 20 years. Policy dictates that now you're applying for a job, we're going to check your credit rating. You know, what is that all about? And the Department of Homeland Security has their own special application that you have to fill out when you go try to find work. You know? Okay. And recently, you got to wake up. I'm telling you, they're getting ready to make their... Chase, one of the huge banks, J.P. Morgan Chase, just lost $2 billion, another $2 billion. Secret documents just came out describing internment camps, probably for Americans. And I'm going to show you, coming right up, I'm going to show you a training video for those young people who haven't any other option but to join the military service and become pawns for the New World Order and their manufactured wars. That's what I said. The wars are made up. They own both sides. The wars are manufactured.
At the U.S. Army, we're looking for people who don't know their history. We're looking for people that don't know America usually goes to war based on lies. We're looking for people who will follow orders without question. Desperate, uneducated people. Men and women who, because of the current economic situation, have no other choice but to join the military out of desperation. Give us a call and sign a contract with us. In your own blood. The U.S. Army. Become a pawn of the New World Order.
So, the young people going into the services have training videos that they're given, and one that I've acquired is the training video for a wonderful new job that you can have if you come into the Army and, you know, work for the New World Order as one of their pawns and kill people for money.
Occupational specialty, internment resettlement specialist. This MOS plays an integral role in providing a uniform system of handling prisoners and detainees. First and always, these MPs are combat support soldiers trained to fight. Then also trained as internment resettlement specialists to control and supervise detainees, to ensure their humane treatment, and to assist them in returning to a productive life. For this job, the Army will train you to use specialized equipment to monitor activity, to conduct searches, and to inspect areas where prisoners work and live. Here, you'll train to in-process prisoners and detainees, and to brief them on their rights. In addition, you'll train to inventory and secure their property, take photographs and fingerprints, issue personal items, and assign cells. You'll train to conduct prisoner formations and roll calls, to monitor their exercise, recreation, and work areas, to prepare and maintain records, and develop written reports. After your initial entry training and advanced individual training, you'll work long hours, day or night, in a garrison or field environment. where you may practice emergency procedures, detect and confiscate contraband, and escort prisoners outside the facility. Serving in this MOS can help you transition from the military to the civilian employment sector. In the Military Police Corps, you'll be providing both combat support and law enforcement wherever you go, always upholding our motto, of the troops and for the troops. Military Occupational Specialty, Internment Resettlement Specialist.
That should be an eye-opener, if nothing else is. So, yes, I'm back after 4 or 5 months. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this show again. I hemmed and hawed a lot about jumping on the camera and doing it again, but this information is just too important. It's becoming urgent with the new things that are coming out, the new evidence that are coming out. We had an Obama whistleblower last month who was mysteriously turned up dead, and then the coroner that had declared it a suicide, which is always the case when a whistleblower gets killed. The coroner turned up dead because he was making noises like he was going to come forward. So this is the guy who had a video of Obama back in his earlier days discussing some kind of incriminating topic with some shady characters, or it wouldn't have been good for Obama. And he was offed. He was whacked. So it's business as usual in politics and in government. And I don't know why most people out there believe what they hear, what is conveyed to you via the mainstream news. With the fatherly, back in the early days, it was the fatherly Walter Cronkite. And, they know what they're doing, okay? To get your confidence. And my father, God bless him, he died a few years ago, but every night he was a mainstream news junkie. Back then we didn't have the internet. We didn't know. There's no excuse anymore not to know the truth about what is taking place behind the scenes. But the mainstream media, your ABC Evening News with the answer and the handsome David Muir and whoever, it's all fluff. And what was it the other night? A ridiculous. With all the YouTube videos that are out there now and available for exposing the truth, whether it's the homeless guy getting beat to death by a gang of cops, or just simply the whole idea that race and civil wars are being fomented, and they don't care. They want to stir resentment against the cops. They want racial tension. And in the movie Conspiracy Theory, which was interesting, good movie, that was on the other night, and Julia Roberts asked Mel Gibson, who is they? And you know what? He never answered her in that movie. Never answered her. But now we know. We've had the internet for several years. There's been more and more researchers every day. Hundreds more people are waking up like you ought to be. After the evening news comes on, it gives you their scripted, edited, filtered hogwash. Find out what's really happening and talk to your neighbor about it. Maybe he'll be smart enough to understand that they're not benevolent. They're not out for your own good. The CDC and the FDA and all these big government institutions are not there to protect you and keep your food safe. In fact, the food supply is pretty darn lethal these days. And you're not getting any. That's why obesity is at such record levels. People aren't getting the proper nutrients, so they stuff themselves full of junk. Check it out. Start getting some good food. Like the pharmaceutical industry, which is all over the news. It's there to make money. It's not there to help you. And the side effects and ongoing illnesses just keep building their millions. And those big corporations are all owned by a small handful. Remember the 1% that the liberal left can't even get the picture. Because, I mean, they stop at a certain point and they say, oh, well, they remain stuck in the false left-right paradigm, which is right, left, Democrat, Republican. Oh, we have a big choice, you know. Try thinking outside the box. They give you the illusion of a choice with two parties. You vote this guy out because the last guy was terrible. This guy turns out to be terrible too. It always continues on toward a totalitarian tiptoe. And I'd say tiptoe to imply the incremental nature of this escalation. And the vaccines, they come on the mainstream news and do a story about, gee, why are so many kids getting autism, and you know, why are Alzheimer's setting in so early in people? It could be, could it be the airplane, you know, big tankers full of aluminum powder with barium salts and whatever pathogen, you know, diseased blood cells which have been found in the fallout? Yes. And so now this week, in the category of soft kill, there's a term for you to learn. It's a very recognizable term in certain circles among the global elite, or the top kingpins at the top of the pyramid. That's largely the way they make their money for their pharmaceutical cartels, is by soft killing and sickening people slowly, so you buy their pharmaceuticals that you learn about on TV during their news. Isn't that coincidental that they give you their fluff news while they sell you their soft kill pharmaceuticals? So get on to some supplements that are good for you and have real nutrients in them. But the news lately is another look at Fukushima, and I think I have a video of it here. Fukushima's been spewing radiation over a year now, for over a year, and they don't tell you on your friendly nightly news, do they? They don't say a damn thing. But there's a pool full of fuel rods sitting precariously on an upper floor on stilts or whatever, teetering, ready for the next, even a shock, a small seismic shock could send that thing toppling. And once the fuel rods are exposed, and there's like over 500, or is it 5,000? I don't know. There's a big number, and it's, well, they say it dwarfs Chernobyl. It dwarfs Chernobyl, and it's big. It's very, very dangerous. All of what we've had drifting over around the world for a whole year, and levels have been measured. People are keeping an eye on it, but you don't hear about it. You don't hear about it on the regular news. Just part of the whole entire soft kill program. So let me see if I can find something about the Fukushima latest findings.
The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant has become yet a renewed concern for the fate of life on our planet, especially in the northern hemisphere, which is, of course, strongly affected by the wind patterns of whatever radiation might be released from Fukushima. In fact, some are claiming that a very large amount of radiation has already been released, and by claiming, I say that with a bit of satire because, of course, it's happened. Multiple meltdowns already happened, and that cover-up is being called Plume Gate. So just search that term if you want to learn more, Plume Gate. And now Senator Ron Wyden, who actually is a pretty decent guy. I used to live in Oregon in his district when he was a congressman. And I don't agree with all his politics, obviously, but pretty decent guy, you know, really within the system. He tries to help people more than most, I would say. And he went out and visited the Fukushima facility to have a look for himself. And when he came back, he issued an urgent warning. He put it right on his own website, the government website, Senate website, and he said that it is a precarious situation, and he said that the entire facility is only protected from a second tsunami by something that he called the bags of rocks placed there, a makeshift wall, he said, made by bags of rocks placed there by hand. That's not going to survive a tsunami. That's not going to stop a giant tidal wave coming in. Not even a chance. Now, at the same time, a former Japan ambassador has gone on the record and made a statement saying that, quote, the fate of the world depends on reactor number 4. Those are his words. So there's been a lot of increasing concern about the spent fuel rods that are in the pools that are now have open access to the environment, and what might happen if there is a subsequent earthquake or a tsunami, which could happen theoretically at any time. It's largely unpredictable. What will happen? And to help answer that question is Arnie Gunderson joining us today by Skype video, an amazing expert. He's been one of the most courageous scientific voices speaking out about the reality of what's happening in Fukushima, even as others try to cover up and downplay. Arnie Gunderson has been actually reporting the truth from his website, fairewinds.com. That's F-A-I-R-E, winds.com. Did I get that right? Is that the right website?
You got it.
Yeah, okay. All right, Arnie, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on the Alex Jones Show. How are you doing today?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm great.
Well, it's an honor to have you on. You are one of the most widely known voices out there in the truth movement, and also among the scientific followers of what's happening in Fukushima. Can you begin by telling us what is your understanding of the status, the current status of the situation in Fukushima, and in particular, reactor number 4 and its spent fuel rod pool?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head at the beginning of the hour here. The Unit 4 has always been, since the very first week or two of the accident, in my mind, the biggest concern. And the term I used a year ago was that if the Unit 4 fuel pool goes, we'll have Chernobyl on steroids. And I still believe that today. The problem with that pool is that there's an entire nuclear core's worth of hot fuel, and by that I mean physically hot because it just ran, and 4 or 5 more years of spent fuel. The combination means that if it were to go dry, that it would burn and liberate an enormous amount of radiation. Brookhaven National Lab said that a fuel pool fire like could be experienced at Fukushima Daiichi 4 would kill 186,000 people from cancer.
Now, is that just a fire situation? If let's say the pool, the containment concrete cracks, the water drains out, or another earthquake happens, it all collapses. Is it a fire that releases that, or is there the possibility of it achieving again criticality or a meltdown scenario?
No, it can't. Low enriched fuel, like in a power reactor, has to have water around it to have a fission. For a chain reaction to occur. Now, what would happen if what I'm postulating is if there's a 7.5 earthquake and the pool cracks or the building topples, but let's say the pool cracks, the pool runs dry, the zircaloy clad, it would become hot enough to burn in air, and it's called a pyrophoric reaction. Once it starts, you can't put it out by throwing water on it because it takes the oxygen out of the water and just gets hotter.
So this would be like a massive dirty bomb essentially being set off, and it would just burn and release into the atmosphere, and then the wind takes it from there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
So let me ask you this. If a terrorist group had this much nuclear material in their hands, how do you think America's response would be different? Because I find it interesting that this is essentially a dirty bomb, a ticking time dirty bomb, and America's doing essentially nothing. But if a terrorist had this much material, how bad would that be, Arnie?
We've been saying that here in the States, and I'm on record as saying that this type of reactor, this Mark I reactor, this fuel pool is up in the air about 100 feet high, and it's a terrorist target. And this isn't since Fukushima. I've been saying this for 10 years. The problem is if a terrorist were to broach the side of the fuel pool with some kind of a guided weapon, not a rifle, but
like an RPG or something like that.
Yeah. That you would drain the pool here in the States, and it would create the same scenario. So this isn't something that the NRC and the nuclear community hasn't heard, They've just ignored it.
What's the deal with the other pool of stored fuel rods that's located reportedly about 50 meters away from this reactor number 4 pool? What's the interaction between those two pools?
The Japanese, unlike the Americans, have kept all their nuclear fuel in the fuel pool. So you've got a plant like Pilgrim with 37 years worth, whereas Fukushima only has 7 or 8. The Japanese took the fuel down out of these precarious pools when they got to 5, 6, 7 years and put them in a common pool. So they have an enormous common pool, but it's at grade level. So from a seismic standpoint, it's much more rigid. The Fukushima 4 pool is way up in the air, so it's like an upside-down pendulum in the event of an accident. In addition to Unit 4, and I'm clearly on record as saying both these, Unit 3 is not much better. So there's actually 2 fuel pools that could cause, certainly the evacuation of Tokyo would be plausible if that pool were to catch fire.
What about the evacuation of California? How much of a concern would it be if that pool, if the fuel rods in Pool 4 caught on fire and that radiation was released and all the isotopes, the iodine-131, the cesium-137, I think is a bigger concern. What, in your estimation, what is the range of possibilities of impacts on states like California, Oregon, Alaska, Washington, especially West Coast USA?
Yeah, well, first off, you're not going to find any iodine because that only has an 8-day half-life, so it's been gone for years. But the amount of cesium in those pools is roughly comparable to what's gone up in nuclear weapons testing, above-ground nuclear weapons testing for for 30 years. I'm telling my friends that on the West Coast, you got to watch it like a hawk. Every day, go up and make sure Unit 4 is standing. And if it's not, we'll watch the plume, but have a plan B to move somewhere.
Well, that's great advice, Arnie, and I want to encourage viewers and listeners to visit your website, fairewinds.com. Again, that's spelled F-A-I-R-E, almost fairewinds.com might be the phonetic way to say it. But the problem with what you just said, or I should say the challenge, is that the mainstream media has already demonstrated it's going to lie about this. So if the average person out there in California, let's say, says, well, I'm going to watch CNN and I'm going to wait for CNN to tell me whether or not there's been a big release of radiation from Fukushima, isn't it possible that CNN may just never cover it, or they may downplay it, or the U.S. government may come up with some kind of weird cover story? Hasn't the truth already been manipulated so much that we can't really trust the media to tell us the future of what's going on there?
Well, I don't trust the mainstream media. Actually, though, I mean, CNN had me on 20 times, so they've done better than most of the others.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. That's actually to their credit to have you on then.
Well, thank you. But you're absolutely right. The mainstream media has underplayed the Fukushima disaster, since it began. It's through alternative shows like yours. It's through alternative sites like mine that people are getting the knowledge that experts have. All the things I've been saying for the last year are turning up in FOIA requests from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They were thinking it. They just weren't telling the public.
Right. You nailed it. The FOIA requests have revealed a lot of interesting information where wasn't one of the documents from the NRC showing that by their calculations they had already estimated that 18,000 infant deaths had occurred in the USA due to the radiation? Or am I getting that right?
I don't remember seeing that one, but there were so many that were terrifying. They had data from the roof of the embassy in Tokyo in the first week that was terrifying, and yet they never made that information public. We had a businessman in Tokyo who was staying on the same block as the U.S. Embassy take a sample from the roof of his hotel, and it was hotter than a pistol. And this was 6 months after the accident. So, we have known that Tokyo was jeopardized at the beginning of this accident since it was happening, and really didn't do much to warn the citizens.
Wow, for those watching PrisonPlanet.tv, they just showed the footage of one of the explosions of one of the reactors. Was that reactor number 2 that was being shown? I don't know. but it looks like a massive explosion. There's been conjecture that perhaps it was a nuclear explosion. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on that, Arnie?
Yeah, it was a prompt, moderated criticality.
Okay, you're going to have to break that down for us all.
Well, a bomb is a prompt, fast criticality. A nuclear reactor is usually never prompt.
Yeah, unfortunately.
This could take an hour, but I'll try to knock it out in 30 seconds.
Well, imagine like all the power that would power the city of Tokyo for 10 years being released in 2 seconds is what you're getting at.
Well, that's what a bomb is, right? If your readers want to go, your listeners want to go up and watch this, you can see that we tested this 40 years ago in an experiment called Borax, B-O-R-A-X, just like the 20 mules. The Borax experiments look almost exactly like the explosion at Fukushima Unit 3. And those were prompt, moderated criticalities.
Okay, so it's not the same as a detonation of a nuclear warhead, obviously, but it's certainly a much faster release than was planned by the engineers who built the facility. Now, one of the things I really respect about you, Arnie, is that you visited Japan, you took some soil samples, and I believe on your website, fairwinds.com, you even mentioned that in the United States, those soil samples, they are so contaminated with radiation that they would be considered, what was the term you used?
Oh, they'd be considered radioactive waste, and they'd have to be, stored in a controlled facility, yeah.
So that soil, how far out from Fukushima did you sample that soil?
Well, that's the point I was trying to make in the video. Tokyo is, depending on where you are, 150 miles away from the accident, and yet, I mean, these people were gardening in soil that was in the States would be considered radioactive waste. And I shot the video when I was at a meeting in Washington D.C. And my point was Tokyo is the capital of Japan, and within 100 miles of Washington are a dozen nuclear reactors. How would we feel if our capital was so contaminated that it should be considered nuclear waste? I think the public reaction would be dramatic. We've got to shut these things down. Whereas because it's happened in the other guy's country, mainstream media has totally ignored it.
But you hit on something really crucial right there. You said that the soils are so contaminated, and that was with cesium-137, correct?
Cesium-137 and 134. That's how you know it came from Fukushima. If it was just cesium-137, it could be bomb, it could be Chernobyl. But when you see 134 and 137 together, that's the signature from Fukushima.
So, the question again, who is they? That Julia Roberts asked Mel Gibson in the movie Conspiracy Theory, and he didn't answer her. Well, now we know, and so should you by this time. I talk about it every year. The Bilderberg Conference, it's one of their bigger get-togethers. The New World Order, the top families, the top statesmen, financiers, globalists, industrialists, those who run the world with their money and their evil power. So they're meeting again, and they're meeting here at Chantilly, Virginia. They're meeting it in the United States at Chantilly, Virginia, and that's near D.C. And I want to go. I'm going to try to go. It's on the 31st of May. It's coming right up through the 4th of June. And they meet, and who are these people? I told you, they're the top families. They're the people who own most of the world and most of the big corporations, and the corporations that are in bed with all the governments of the world. Policy is made by these people, okay? It's passed down. They develop policy on the golf course sometimes over drinks. But it's passed along to your representatives, the people who are supposed to be representing you. They are told what's going to happen. And so they come along and they play their little sideshow of, so-and-so. Senator Snort introduced a bill, bullwash, hogwash. This is the big illusion of the right-left paradigm, you know, the illusion of a choice. They don't even make, whoever's in there doesn't even make the choice. But there's always just enough truth and just enough legitimacy to keep the whole thing going. Bilderberg, they're meeting in Chantilly at the end of May, and these are the guys who make the policy. Here they are.
An invite-only meeting of the world's political elite and financial magnates. The Bilderberg Group is currently underway in Switzerland. The annual event has long been shrouded in secrecy, something that's given rise to a strong protest movement. RT's Laura Emmett now reports on just what might be the main agenda going on behind closed doors.
The exclusive ski resort of St. Moritz in June is perfect Bilderberg territory, out of season and, crucially, practically deserted. There are two hives of activity in town, though. One, the luxury hotel Souvretta, where around 130 of the world's most influential politicians, businessmen and sovereigns are meeting behind closed doors. And the other in a much cheaper hotel, where concerned activists are determined to break that wall of secrecy down. They've set up what they believe is the world's first alternative media centre. They'd work for mainstream outlets too, but they're not here.
Just not enough Western media, not enough from the UK. It's quite appalling. A Swiss news agency has just released some names of this year's attendees, and on the list is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. I would have thought that makes it news.
Other Bilderberg regulars include David Rockefeller, the editor-in-chief of The Economist magazine, the Greek finance minister and the president of the World Bank. They're all rumoured to be here this year, unlike another regular, former IMF chief Dominique Strauss-Kahn, on bail in New York for an alleged sex attack. There has been interest from the Swiss national press this year. Bilderberg, which is widely believed to support big government and economic consolidation, runs entirely contrary to the Swiss idea of independence, local government and neutrality. Blogger Manfred Petrich has run a successful campaign to that effect, playing on the reported €10 million taxpayer bill for securing the Spanish Bilderberg.
We don't accept that a private meeting, because that's what they call themselves, a private meeting, the security has to be paid by the taxpayer. And I think a lot of people understand that, especially when the government is saying, well, we don't have money for this or that. And here we go, and it costs a lot of money to secure this private meeting of these people.
The agenda's secret, along with everything else, but Bilderbergers are believed to be deciding on who should replace their friend DSK at the top of the IMF. They're also concentrating on how to save the euro, which was, leaked agendas show, their brainchild.
We don't want to be in the EU, we don't want to be in the euro, but these are all the things that they actually created. The EU is a construct of the Bilderbergers. The euro is a construct of the Bilderbergers.
This Swiss Bilderberg is different from last year's Spanish one. Security's much lower key for a start, and there's no kilometre-wide cordon around the hotel. But secrecy still dominates, with protesters saying even the Swiss government doesn't know who's attending. Every year, though, there are more and more activists and increasing media attention. They're saying if you told us what was going on, we wouldn't have to speculate. Laura Emmett, RT, St. Moritz, Switzerland.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of things happening now. I mean, the document just came out outlining the more details of the camps, you know, the detainment camps. And, of course, the video that you saw on how to detain Americans. Well, what is, oh yeah, the TSA, right? TSA. I mean, no kidding. They're the Gestapo. They're the modern Gestapo. They started out in the airport and they're groping senators, U.S. senators. Maybe I'll throw in a video of the U.S. senator last week brushing a hand away from a TSA guy who went for his crotch. And then they detained him for even longer. He probably missed his plane. I don't know if I can find that video, but I might. Anyway, TSA is going to start coming onto the streets. They're going to start coming to the malls. They already announced they're going to start checking people at big events, like big football games and baseball games and stuff. TSA, to grope you down. You're the terrorist. You're the suspect. It's the biggest lie in history. It's all, you got to remember this when they come on with their stories about the mastermind of 9/11. It's garbage. So the TSA is going to start being around more and more and, detaining people, feeling you up, try to grope your crotch. And so I'll be back in a minute with more.
Nightmare and insanity are akin. Mysterious and involuntary states that skew and distort objective reality. One wakens from nightmare. From insanity, there is no awakening. Whether Americans live in the one state or the other is the paramount question of this era. For 200 years, Americans have been indoctrinated with a mythology created, imposed, and sustained by a manipulating cabal, a financial elite that built its absolute control on the muscle and blood, ignorance and credulity of its citizenry. It has now metastasized into the corporate tyranny that owns and controls America. America began with the invasion of a populated continent and the genocide of its people. Once entrenched, it embraced enslavement of another race. With those pillars of state in place, it declared itself an independent nation in a testament that proclaimed the equality of all mankind. In that monumental act of hypocrisy, America's myth had its genesis. A constitution was written that came to be regarded as Holy Writ. Designed by men of wealth and prominence, its central purposes were to defend private property and suppress mass democracy. It has fulfilled those mandates beyond the dreams of its creators. With the existing oligarchy secure in law and native people largely exterminated, the ruling class increased its wealth and power fantastically in the 19th century, using the government as its enabler, exploiting to the limit the device of chartered corporations. So empowered, the financial elite used the military to expand its sway beyond the continent. Regions, territories, islands, and whole countries were annexed, invaded, and possessed outright, their peoples crushed, suppressed, and exploited. Because ordinary Americans, like any people, need to believe that whatever the ruling class undertakes in their name must be essentially benevolent, noble in purpose, and justified in fact, the American myth had to be radically modified for imperial expansion. The foundational myth was that the Americans had come to a howling wilderness teeming with godless savages, and through invincible strength of character and purity of purpose had tamed the land and honorably earned the right to possess their bountiful home. In the era of extraterritorial expansion, that version was polished to justify and ennoble imperialism. The new corollary was that America was obliged by our manifest destiny to carry our mission into barbaric darkness wherever tyranny created abuse and suffering. A national myth that absolutely binds the loyalty of a people to its government must be a subtle and powerful elixir that elevates and aggrandizes that people's self-regard. National policy will then appear to be an extension of its superior citizenry's inchoate will and an instrument of justified arrogance toward the lesser world. The simple, powerful myth of America's heroic and altruistic benevolence, shaped by the financial elite, infused Americans with a hubristic belief in their racial superiority that mobilized gave imperialist enterprises the character of a quasi-religious crusade. In this way, insatiable imperialism acquired the apparent moral perfection of a syllogism. With World War II, the world was reconfigured. American capitalism emerged supreme from the horror that had virtually wrecked its capitalist partners. The Soviet Union, though, in spite of having absorbed much the greatest devastation of all from Nazi Germany, rose astonishingly from its ruin to become the sole rival to America as a world power. This challenge was not competitive, it was systemic. Soviet communism was a direct threat to American hegemony in that it categorically refuted the philosophical basis of predatory capitalism. Grounded in Marx and Lenin, it attacked capitalism's inherent evils, monstrous inequities, and flagrant injustices that, when exacerbated by speculation, exploitation, and fraud, would eventually destroy it. And it promoted world revolution to that end. The Cold War required further refinement of the American myth. Instead of simply intervening where circumstances supposedly demanded that we impose our system, America now had to be the shield and bulwark of the sacred capitalist system in which free enterprise, magically identified with democracy, was equally to be defended. This version held through many surrogate confrontations in the era of mutually assured destruction, and survived even the debacle of Vietnam, lasting until the collapse of the Soviet Union. On radio and television, Americans were subjected to an unrelenting barrage of hyper-patriotism, in which American moral superiority was a given, and America's self-touted courage, generosity, and decency were its unchallengeable proofs. The implosion of the Soviet Union left America, in its own terms, the sole superpower in a unipolar world, which required further retooling of the myth. The practical effect of having no doomsday enemy, China wouldn't do yet, was to supercharge its element of pure hubristic ego. America was no longer just the defender of the free world from heresy. It was now, by virtue of its glorious self-touted exceptionalism, required to oversee and police it, in the interests and for the benefit of all. Power tends to corrupt, said Lord Acton, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. When the only rival to American power disintegrated, our ruling elite saw the opportunity, for the first time in history, for one country to absolutely dominate and control the world. This consensus was expressed in a policy statement by major hard right-wing political players titled The Project for a New American Century. This triumphalist manifesto laid out a plan for absolute American access to and control of essential resources and raw materials worldwide, guaranteed by our military enforcing full-spectrum dominance. The American myth, which had lost some momentum in the totally unexpected so-called Cold War victory, was now re-energized with a proactive essence and endowed with the glowing radiance of a true and, for the first time, self-professed imperial mission. The attack on the towers, an unimaginable provocation, was the trigger mechanism for the explosive launch of the effort to impose that imperial model in practice on the world. It has been without question the most spectacular failure in the history of American misadventure. After a decade marked by the waste of trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives, the stunning bankruptcy of our internally burglarized nation, and a consequent recession more fundamentally damaging than the Great One, Imperial America has nothing to show for the astonishing folly of its arrogant overreach, but unequivocal disasters in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, with no end of madness in sight. It is clear that the hypnotic hold of the American myth on the loyalty of the people has led only to disgrace and tragedy, and set a course to inevitable imperial decline and ruin. This truth, though, entirely mistakes the purpose of the myth. It was never intended to serve either our country or our people. It was created solely to shield, buttress, and exalt the financial ruling class. It has done that with complete and astonishing success. As a prime example, the massive looting of funding for the Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan wars to enrich the corporate tyranny is on a unique scale of its own, without anything remotely comparable to its flagrant obscenity in the whole long history of war. Neither the Pentagon nor the government can account for the billions of dollars that have vanished there. There is no doubt that beyond the outrageously inflated no-bid contracts given to giant corporations with their obscene guaranteed profits, much of the money was simply stolen by, through, or in spite of the military, and distributed among thieves and accomplices. Much of it came in bricks on huge pallets, for convenience, presumably. As this wholesale corporate robbery was in progress under military oversight abroad, the corporate tyranny evolved a new set of impenetrably complex devices for the generation of money without either any economically productive source or result at home. The sole driving force and purpose of capitalism is, of course, the realization of profit. According to that iron calculus, reducing production costs increases profit margin. This leads to the obvious conclusion that as production costs near zero, profit is maximized. There is no provision for social good in capitalist theory. Corporations, created to optimize commercial opportunity through efficient specialization, were originally required to operate for public good, but that provision was quickly finessed and forgotten. American law courts have always favored corporate concentrations of wealth since they, like the Congress, exist to serve moneyed interests. And the judiciary has consistently cooperated in ruling reliably for corporations and against the interests of the people. Indeed, without considering the question in law, the Supreme Court long ago endowed corporations with personhood, that is, with all the rights of human beings under our Constitution. That this travesty occurred as a slipshod clerical error shows that the Court preferred to mask this perversion of the intent of the 14th Amendment as an unexamined assumption, rather than risk an eventual test which would have created public outrage. Given the collusion of Congress and the courts in securing legal invulnerability for the corporate tyranny, and the fact that corporations' only duty is maximization of profit, it was inevitable that megabanks, huge brokerage houses, giant insurance conglomerates, gilded hedge funds, and credit agencies pretending to certify their work all engaged in massive criminal fraud and deception for just that purpose. The result was the crash of '08, the recession, and the unprecedented bailout of the biggest banks and investment houses with taxpayer dollars. So much for the invisible hand of the free market. In recent years, two related trends have battered the American myth. First, any belief the world had in it has been shattered by a catastrophic series of imbecile military disasters which has eroded its efficacy at home. Second, in response, the state has made crude efforts to boost its waning power by imposing totalitarian-style surveillance, intimidation, and coercion on the American people to a degree unprecedented in scope and scale. The vast, clanking medieval apparatus of Homeland Security that has sprouted like an enormous poison fungus since 9/11, with its brutal police state mindset, the odious Patriot Act with its flagrant subversions of the Bill of Rights, the endless, fantasy-based terror peddling of the prostitute corporate media with its clowns and harpies churning irrational fear and anger in the uninformed, all this grim repressive machinery is a ham-handed attempt to distract Americans from the real causes of their injury, abuse, and oppression. And yet, even with the American myth now exposed for the tissue of lies, deceptions, and frauds that it has always been, it still keeps its phenomenal hold on the great mass of American people. The sad reality is that for the majority, their own identities have been so deeply and thoroughly infused with the myth that to disbelieve it is to disbelieve in themselves. So the dead American myth lives on in its deadness, horribly masking our crapshot economy, our bankrupt debtor's prison of a society, our ghost dance charade of kabuki democracy, while typhoons of impending social, economical, and ecological disaster build their enormous, lightning-charged thunderheads above the dark future before us. And what does the dead myth still obscure? What is beyond the wall of failing deception and dishonesty? What horrors has the shoddy fable so long and effectively concealed? It is a world brutalized by the violence of our imperialist mania. It is the wrecked and pillaged economies looted by our predatory capitalist austerity regimes. It is the hundreds of millions of starved, dying children sacrificed to Wall Street commodities gaming. It is the multitudes of innocent, ignorant people barely surviving under absolutist regimes propped up by our tax dollars, while our banks siphon off profits from arming their brutal police states and bribing their kings, sheikhs, or generals. It is the millions of dead and maimed and raped populations of simple tribal people that our indiscriminately murderous juggernaut has left in its bloody wake in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. It is the bitter and appalling legacy of hate and repulsion, disdain and fear which America has earned with its hegemonist villainy in every region of the world. And at home, what is it we Americans have been so complicit in hiding from ourselves, in our devotion to the perverse legend that has come to inhabit our souls like an incubus? It is millions of us with no work or hope in middle age whose jobs and homes have been devoured by the sick fraud machine of Wall Street. It is the trashed, demolished weed lots of our major cities crumbling in fire-gutted ruin. It is the many cities with industries defunct and factories dismantled and shipped overseas. It is our decaying, defunded public schools, our bankrupt states and counties, our overtaxed, antiquated public transportation systems, our obsolete, dissolving infrastructure, our gigantic and irrational prisons horror, our cynical healthcare con game, and over it all, the jackboot mechanism of our police state, armed and empowered, ready for use against us all. This is where we are. The great question now is whether we can awaken from our long nightmare and face the terrifying and exhilarating prospect of living in reality without the false props and dishonest constructs of a hoodwinked and dishonored people, or whether we have internalized the falsity to such an extent that it has become a collective insanity. In 1846, Henry David Thoreau, offended to his soul by the American invasion of Mexico, protested and went to jail. In his essay on civil disobedience, he said this of state policy: "If injustice is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. Let your life be a counter-friction to stop the machine." To attempt to break the death grip of the American myth will be a titanic challenge. To even begin to rebel against the might of the national security state will require the courage to face far more than official disapproval. Imperial America will respond to even the most peaceful and orderly protest with hard police action, and the level of repression will rise with the scope and seriousness of the action undertaken. Small protests will have no effect. Organized mass demonstrations will draw the brutally motivated national security state apparatus down upon them. Americans, excepting our underclass, have no experience with violent police or military repression. Those who commit peaceful civil disobedience will swiftly find to their cost how it works. In a national security state that has eradicated all laws that prevent abuse of the public, whatever the state does is legal. To such a pass have we in America come, as a result of our long historic indoctrination and abject submission to our ruling class. To achieve any redemption for Americans, to make possible any more just, humane, and life-honoring society, will require complete abandonment of the system of predatory capitalism. It offers no prospect of reform or improvement, and we have all been witness to the absurdly corrupt idiocy of our so-called democratic process for generations. America is nearing the greatest crisis point in its history, and the terrific coming cataclysm will determine the future of our country. If we cannot rise in dominating numbers to reject the heartless, mindless, soulless machine of imperial predatory capitalism, we will be condemned to a fascistic command and control horror in which human beings are mere possessions of the state, units of production or service, and then perhaps not even that, as excess population in that brave new world may simply be eliminated. That end is not inevitable. We are not lost. We are not defeated, since to this moment we have not engaged. We have not honored our responsibility as human beings. We have not defended our humanity. We have abjured our power and let ourselves be ruled. All around the world, the rolling thunder of irresistible outrage is now heard and felt. In Egypt and Spain, Syria and Greece, Iraq and Sudan, Afghanistan and Ireland, everywhere the legitimate anger of humanity is fueling an uprising against the dead hand of predatory capitalism and its evils. And in Americans, so long trapped, encapsulated like flies in amber in a false religion of state idolatry, the anger is deep, widespread, and growing. The myth is broken and dead. It is up to those who know and care to lead. Thomas Paine said, "These are the times that try men's souls." Nothing is guaranteed us. That can't matter. We cannot consider odds or outcomes. We simply cannot let the machine of injustice grind on. We must confront with calm courage a vicious, tyrannical system that is destroying the earth and its life and its people. We must put our lives on the line to oppose it, and we must do it now. The nightmare machine of rapacious exploitation has overthrown decency and reason, and its bloody human treason flourishes over us. This must be ended. We must end it. Let your life be a friction to stop the machine.
Well, I wish I had more time for you. I bet you wish you had more time for me and my pleasant self. Not exactly David Muir or Scott Pelley with his compelling truth behind the scenes in Afghanistan. Just another phony war to guard the opium poppies up there that are being grown under the auspices, by the way, of the United States government. Don't we know that? They've been doing that from the Southeast Asia and the Far East for years and years. In Vietnam, they started putting the heroin in bodies, the bodies of soldiers, of pawns who played their game. And yeah, they're growing the heroin. They know the heroin's being grown and shipped here. But they'll arrest you for it on a small scale. That's how they operate. But on the large scale, they make more billions and billions for their black operations and whatnot. So, but I gotta go. I'll try to be back sooner with more clips for you and less ranting on my part. Good night. This is News and Blues, and I'm Rob Spear. Thank you.
Checkout counter at the Church of Fame.